When it comes to moving up from poverty, there's been a long debate over the importance of location. More than 20 years ago, the federal government tried to lift the barriers of concentrated poverty by making it easier for poor families to live in other communities. At first, it seemed the strategy in the program called Moving to Opportunity wasn't very effective, but a re-examination several years later shows some encouraging results. We'd like to welcome one of the researchers in the new study, a pre-doctoral fellow in the Department of Economics at Harvard University, Jamie Fogle. Thank you very much for being with us, Jamie.
Nice to be here.
Jamie, I guess what happens here is you ended up looking at this moving to opportunity population only after you were looking at a bigger picture.
So what we did was we began by looking at the entire U.S. population. We linked parents to their kids and tried to quantify levels of economic mobility across the country. We first did that, then we moved on to trying to understand what causal role each place in the country played in shaping kids' outcomes. So to do that, we looked at kids whose families moved from one area to another. We did this at two levels. We did this at the commuting zone level, which can roughly be thought of as the metropolitan area, a set of metropolitan areas that cover the entire country. We did this at the county level as well.
Now, talk about the Moving to Opportunity program. What exactly was going on there?
So the Moving to Opportunity experiment was run by the Department of Housing and Urban Development in the 90s. What it did was it gave a set of families living in poor areas a voucher to move to a richer area. There were two different types of treatments. One gave families Section 8 vouchers, which are just traditional low-income housing vouchers. And the other gave them a voucher with the stipulation that they move to an area with lower poverty. These families entered the experiment and then were assigned which group by lottery, and there was also a control group. And there were a number of follow-up studies that measured a range of outcomes, things like kids' success in school, indicators of their happiness, health outcomes, and incomes. And the preliminary work, or a lot of the work done in the late 90s and for the last 10 years or so, didn't find much of a positive impact on kids. Now, what we did was, when our other work showed that there was a large effect in our sample of place, we wanted to square those results with the Moving to Opportunity survey. So what we did was we revisited the Moving to Opportunity experiment, and we looked at kids' incomes and other outcomes at a later age. Now, one of the problems with the early studies of Moving to Opportunity were that the kids were too young when their outcomes were measured. A lot of the kids were in their very early 20s, and you can imagine kids who are likely to have high earnings as adults would probably be in college then. So they might have earnings of zero. And so not getting an effect at that age isn't surprising. We were able to look at these kids later on in their late 20s and at age 30, when you would expect to be able to find more of an effect. And that's exactly what we did. We found an effect, a positive effect of moving to a better area for kids who were young at the time of the move.
Any idea of what it is about those other areas that help these families do better?
So in the Moving to Opportunity survey or experiment, the stipulation was they moved to lower poverty areas. So that's really what was special about the areas there. Our study can't really identify exactly what the factors were that helped them, because we weren't really varying enough dimensions to really pin that down. I think the primary takeaway, in our view, is that places matter. We don't know exactly what it is about places. That's an area for further study that we plan on studying further, and we hope others will. But what we really hope our study will do is show that places do matter and that further study is valuable.
Chris, what else is going on here is that the people who live in those other, maybe less impoverished communities, their life was changed too, because you had this greater diversity in your community. Any sense about how that affected them, for better or for worse?
We didn't track the outcomes for people who were already living there. We only followed the people who are part of the study, so we really don't know anything. I wouldn't expect that their outcomes changed very much at all, because those people who were moving would have represented a pretty small fraction of people in the area they moved to. So I don't think it would have noticeably changed the composition of those neighborhoods. But we didn't follow those people, so we really can't be sure.
I guess the findings here, they're really, in a way, quite a challenge to our usual notion of how we deal with poverty, especially through government programs, because, putting everybody in one housing project someplace, the economies of scale, all these other communities that don't want poor people around. So I guess you're really pushing against quite a lot with findings like this.
I think that's true. What we really hope to show is just that these things do matter, that people can be lifted out of poverty, that government programs, policies can have an impact. We still want to learn more about what the best policies are, what the best ways of helping people are, but it's not necessarily hopeless. Just because you were born into poverty and were born living in an impoverished area does not mean that you're doomed. Something can be done.
So what's the next chapter of research on this?
Well, there are going to be a lot of different dimensions. We're not really sure yet, but what we would really like to do is to understand what it is about places that cause good or bad outcomes. We'd like to understand what it is about a place that we can change, and then think about what sort of policies we can enact to make those changes.